Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, you can tell looking behind us, assuming Kevin hasn't zoomed in too much already, that it is in fact a big game week because all year they have gotten away from the tradition of having the beat opposing team logo on the scoreboard on the indoor facility here. This week, Tony, there is a task at hand, and that task at hand for the Buckeyes is to beat Oregon.
Beat Oregon, but it's about Ohio State. It's about themselves, Tom. As we know, all season long, it's not about the opponent. It is about themselves, but also definitely beat Oregon. They are headed on the road to do that. They'll leave on Friday. We'll see them on Friday. We spoke with today. We were talking from, as Tom said, Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We spoke with Ryan Day, spoke with Chip Kelly, spoke with Will Howard. So the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the run game coordinator, as they call Will Howard. And I think where I would like to start is this being a very big game for Will Howard. He's won a Big 12 championship as a starter. He's taken Texas to overtime as a starter on the road after being down 27-7. I don't want to say this is the biggest game he's ever played in, but
I'll say it. It's the biggest game he's ever played in.
When you figure the stakes and you're still playing for a national title, arguably number 2 versus number 3, biggest game he's ever played in. And a lot of this is going to come down to how well he plays and the decisions that he makes. But some of those decisions are just simply rely on your teammates. Don't try to do too much. You talked about being neutral. You can't get too high, too low. But there's going to be a time in this game where he has to be very, very high because the situation requires it.
Well, the amount of performance, the amount of, hey, that was an amazing play, is higher in this game than it was against Akron or Western Michigan because you're talking about finer margins here. The windows in the passing game are going to be tighter. The amount of time you have in the pocket is going to be less. The amount of time, the urgency in terms of making the correct read on run, pass, handoff, keep, all of that is more difficult this week than it has been at any point in his Ohio State season so far. So you have to be sharper than you have been at any point. But you asked him a question, which not only did he call a great question, but also started giving you some Kenny Rogers lyrics.
Right.
So this is, I don't want to say single greatest moment of your entire career, but also I'm not saying that.
Well, and yeah, it was pretty good. The only thing better is if he would have dropped in some Conway Twitty.
I'm going to guess. I mean, he did spend multiple years in Kansas. I'm going to guess he's not a Conway Twitty guy, but you never know.
Well, these kids today, I don't want to generalize like 3 generations basically, but I will. Not enough Conway Twitty with these kids today. But back to Will Howard, I did ask him, how do you balance? How do you get to that line of making the play that can change the game without making the play that you're trying to do too much and you cost the game? And it was very interesting. He said, "What you got to," and I did write it down. I typed it out, but you got to capitalize on the things that are available to you and not force things that aren't there. And really, that's the entire difference. And he did say sometimes you just have to take your medicine and check it down. Sometimes you also have to take your medicine and just get down because this defensive front is going to get after him. But this is a very interesting answer because, as Ryan Day would say, if I were to ask him, like, that's the art of playing quarterback. That's the art of coaching. All of these decisions at that very time when you need to make them. And sometimes the discretion being the better part of valor for a lot of what a quarterback has to do.
For sure. This is one of those games where coaches always talk about you just need to do your 1/11th. And this is a game where you have to do your 1/11th probably a little better, but you have to do you have to do your 1/11th, not someone else's 1/11th. This is true of quarterbacks. You can't, this isn't the right read, but boy, we really need a big play right now. Oh boy, maybe I can fit that in. I'm not sure. You have to be measured. You have to be, play within the system. It's all the boring stuff. I feel like I keep saying that this year. It's like I've gotten old enough that I've watched enough football now that it's kind of like, all these old football cliches are turned out to be true after all these years, ironically enough. But it's all the stuff coaches talk about. You have to do your 1/11th. You have to play responsibly, you may get called upon to make a play, and you may be in a spot where what you need to do, if you're behind and it's the final minute, I go back to Nico Ima.
Yeah.
I had this from Tennessee last game. Iama, I believe. Last play of the game, he runs. He needs to throw the ball in the end zone. No one's open, so he's like, "Well, I guess I'll run it." And it's like, "No, you can't. You're 30 yards out, and there's 10. They dropped 9 guys, I think, on that play. You're not going to outrun 9 guys, and you." Absolutely killing me with this music. He runs and he runs out of bounds, and it's like, that's the last play of the game. It's like, well, there were times during the game when that would have been the correct play. That was not the correct play right there. Right before we started recording, they were playing crowd noise outside very loudly. It was like, well, this is going to be loud, but at least it will be some good ambiance and sort of drive home the point that, hey, they're preparing. And then immediately, for the first time in show history, the audio experience got so much better right before we hit record instead of getting immediately worse. But now here we are. Now we are here playing music loudly for no reason whatsoever.
Cover band? What is this?
I'm a little insulted that you would even ask me, as if I would know. It's not Conway Twitty, I can tell you that.
All right, let's not take shots about music, Tom. Not when they're directed at me. But you talk about the coaching cliches. Are you saying then that maybe Will Howard just needs to pin his ears back in this one?
I think that's the wrong side of the ball. The Oregon Ducks will be pinning their ears back, and that's what
Ducks don't have ears that are pin backable. They have basically holes in their heads. Watch some television once in a while, Tom. Those are learning things. I don't know if that's actually true.
I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with all of us here on the Magic School Bus. The challenge that Will Howard and Chip Kelly and Ryan Day all talked about is that Oregon front. That Oregon front is no joke. I mean, I think everyone individually talked about Jordan Birch. I think Will Howard might have just called him number 1, but the pass rush is going to get there potentially quick, and that's going to be something that Will Howard has had to deal with a little bit on and off this year. Not a ton. He's been pretty well protected back there in the pocket. That's going to be different but he has years and years of experience where he probably was running for his life a little bit more in previous stops.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan Birch, like 6'6", 295, plays defensive end, is really big. Leads the Big Ten with 5 sacks this year. 2.5 of them came against Michigan State, so he's kind of picking up steam. This is going to be the best test for Josh Fryer and Josh Simmons, whoever gets him. And they play like a quasi. They play some 3-4. They'll play some 4-3, some 4-2-5, and they'll mix it around. Like they list Mateo Uyunglele, who is 255, 260 pounds, as an outside linebacker, for instance. Mm-hmm. And so they're big across the front. They'll put a linebacker, inside linebacker between the tackle and the guard, or between the guard and the center, wherever, just trying to create more things, more havoc in there. So this is going to be the best, most entertaining test for the Ohio State offensive line. I think they were very prepared for Iowa in their defensive front. I think that went a lot better than they were anticipating in terms of they were expecting more from Iowa.
Yeah.
What they don't want to do is let their foot off the gas, we were so well prepared for that one. I'm sure this one will go swimmingly. Yeah,
I think you have to remember that Iowa's a good defense. Oregon's a good defense. They're very different defenses. Yes. They have very different players, very different schemes, very different levels of aggressiveness. Iowa is passive, is probably not the complimentary way to say it, but they're not as aggressive. That has not gone well in the past. They have been. They're not quite as aggressive. They do not have any 295-pound defensive ends. So Iowa is very good at what they do. They're not necessarily a big play defense. You'll see them make plays from time to time, but Oregon is more of a big play defense where, boy, they're going to get after you. They're going to hit the quarterback. They're going to force fumbles. They're going to force you into bad throws. They're going to make you throw into tight windows. The back seven, I could buy into. The back seven is similar to Iowa in some ways, but the front four that the Buckeyes are going to face this weekend is not similar to anything they've seen maybe since Dan Lanning adjacent defense they saw against the Georgia Bulldogs a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and they've got good linebackers. One of them was a former baseball player who walked onto the team in 2022, and he's like leading the team in tackles. So, Kevin, you got something?
I've got a super chat from King Bronco. Ohio is like Sass Bats, Oregon gonna found more fork.
Thank you, King Bronco, for the super chat. Always appreciate the drop-ins.
That transitions us nicely into Big Ten teams. Stay with me. I'm a professional. Big Ten teams traveling multiple time zones, because King Bronco's beloved Michigan Wolverines just did that, and we're part of the 8 in the 1-8 in terms of how that has gone for Big Ten teams. So far this season, teams traveling more than 2 time zones away. We went through this. I think we went through this in like a group text or something earlier today, that when you look at it, it's like, I don't know that the time zone is the real reason that has caused, there have been a lot of teams who have, UCLA was a part of a couple of those. UCLA is not very good. Well, guess what? UCLA lost most of those times. So you've got, I think, a question as to whether that's a cause and effect thing or not. But the Buckeyes have an approach this weekend that they're going to take, and they're going to, they have a game plan for the travel and all of that too.
Similar to an approach that we have talked about, which is one, just staying on Eastern time, and that just makes it basically a 7:30 kick or a 7:30 kick here. But they view it. Ryan Day just says it's 2 hours longer than a 2-hour flight longer than Nebraska. So like, what's the difference? They're all very comfortable. They will just operate on Eastern time and treat it like any other evening kick. And he really no-sold it, really just dismissed the idea that it's any kind of, difficulty. The real difficulty is going to be the environment and team travel schmavel, I believe is the exact quote. And maybe don't quote me on that.
Don't put quotation marks around that. That may have been the TLDR. I don't think that was a direct quote.
But he didn't seem concerned at all about the extra 2 hours of travel. And again, I mentioned on the board, on the Buckeye Head All message board presented by Jeffrey Ruiz Columbus, like, well, the reason people think it's a big issue is because of all of the multiple stops that you have to make along the way with these commercial flights for these teams. And it's like, no. These are all chartered. It's just a straight shot, and it's very easy. I think the only is like USC losing at Minnesota. Is that the only? Was that even an upset? Like technically?
Yeah, I think it was an upset. I think it was a point spread upset. Right. I think that Minnesota and USC and Michigan have sort of shown that they're probably in a similar tier of the Big Ten this year. So I don't know if it really was an upset. You will have people like, this is going to be a pain in the butt for Penn State to travel west this weekend. They're going to USC this weekend, correct? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, they're going out west to face USC. James Franklin talked about it in his press conference yesterday. They don't have a long enough runway at the State College Airport to have a big enough plane that they could fly a nonstop flight to California. So they're going to take a 2-hour bus ride to Harrisburg. I think it was a 2-hour bus ride to Harrisburg and fly out of the Harrisburg International Airport, which it feels like at some point, with Penn State being a fairly significant football team, that this would have come up at some point. Like, you could just, I guess they haven't had a lot of long flights, but this feels like something that Joe Paterno could have just sort of kicked and screamed about 30 years ago and gotten taken care of.
So have they always had to do this for like the Rose Bowl then, I guess?
I would assume so. I mean, the Rose Bowl,
How far can they make it? Do they want to push it? It's like, well, we could make it to Kansas City.
Yeah, well,
probably not like Denver.
Well, the Rose Bowl, I think you're flying. You're not necessarily always flying out together on the same flight. You got players coming from home, so that might not have been quite as much of an issue. Have kind of smaller planes there, but yeah, I remembering the Michigan basketball plane that overran the runway somewhere. So you probably don't want to. FAA doesn't generally want you to screw around with the restrictions too much.
You think that they won't like this travel for Penn State? Just imagine when they have to play UCLA in the Rose Bowl, and it's a 2-hour bus ride to your airport, and then you finally get to LA, and then wherever you're in your hotel, it's like an hour ride to the game. Then from traffic and getting up the mountains and into the Rose Bowl. It's the toughest part of the travel from Penn State to UCLA is the buses. It's not the 6 hours in the plane; it's the 3 hours in the bus.
Yeah. we should probably get things. Thank you. That's your Penn State football update for the week here on Nittany Lion Weekly. Thank you very much. Chip Kelly, going to be a return home for him this weekend. Home-ish. I mean, he's had many homes during his career. But he was asked about, what's it like going back to the program that you built? And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. Well, for one, Rich Brooks, his name is on the field.
Yep.
And then, of course, Mike Bellotti was the coach that hired Chip Kelly, and Mike Bellotti was the all-time winningest coach there. So two really good guys right in a row, and then succeeded by Chip Kelly, but obviously very much looking forward to being back there. It's not his first time back there, but has great memories there. And somebody asked him, compare the two, compare Ohio State and Oregon, and he used a quote about comparison is the thief of joy. He loves everything about all. He loved it there, loves it here. Maybe when you retire, you reminisce about this and that, but yeah, nothing but good things to say. Like, he seems like he's very upbeat this week, which maybe that's bad news for the Oregon defense. Ryan Day seemed a little bit more subdued. Like, we've got some stuff to do. But Chip Kelly was chipper, if you would.
He was. I noticed that, and I meant to mention that. But yeah, Ryan Day was. Ryan Day doesn't get like tense. I mean, he doesn't get angry generally. It's just. Sometimes there's weeks where he's joking around a little bit, and sometimes there's weeks where he's a little more curt implies mean or angry, and that's not quite right. He's just a little more brief with his answers and a little more serious with his answers. And this was one of those weeks. Chip Kelly talked about, he comparing, I think this was the same answer, comparing Ohio State and Oregon, and it's just like, well, do you want asparagus or Brussels sprouts as your side? It's just kind of, whatever. They're both good, whatever you want to do, kind of whatever you feel like. He's joking around with reporters and, who gets called on in what order. And he just very much seems like a guy who feels very good about where things are right now. We'll see how he feels after practice on Tuesday and practice on Wednesday. We'll be back in here Wednesday evening, and we'll get a chance to talk to Ryan Day again. And I'm going to be fascinated to hear what Ryan Day has to say about the practice, because sometimes you get a boy, it was a great practice, incredible focus. Sometimes it's it was okay. It wasn't where it needed to be yesterday, but it was better today. I'm going to be very interested to hear that, because we're only, this is only a 28-hour difference or something in terms of time, but that's going to be, those are their 2 big days of practice. So this is like setting up the big days. Next time we're in here, we're going to be talking to him after. So we're going to have probably a very different perspective on things from them.
Yeah, Tuesday always the most physical practice, and then Wednesday is dialed down a little, and then each day gets dialed down more. But I wonder if Chip, his mood today is tied to some of the things Will Howard was saying about there are things that we can attack with the Oregon defense, talking about there are some things that Oregon does that they feel good about. And that one of the other aspects was Oregon has the secondary with the defense with just several first-year guys. I think three transfers in the secondary itself, that maybe some communication issues they can exploit there. So I think they feel pretty good. There's plenty of reason to feel good about the running game overall. Some of the short yardage stuff they will always need to clean up, but I think they feel very good about where the offense is. Will Howard feels very good about his decision making. He did mention something that we keep talking about. I'm sure other people have talked about as well. 1 or 2 bad throws a game. He's like, I need to get rid of those 1 or 2 bad decisions a game. Other than that, things are going very well for him, with whether it's the RPO, whether it's checkdowns, whether it's I should throw this one, I shouldn't. He's just like, this week especially, that 1 or 2 decision, the first or second decision, can cost you the game. And so, no one to hold him, Tom. No one to fold him. No one to walk away. No one to run. There'll be time enough for counting when the Dillon's done.
When the ball game's done. Yeah, this is a game where, I mean, we talked about this on the morning show yesterday, that just to say, oh, well, it's going to. Does Dillon Gabriel make the great throw that you've seen him make? Does Dillon Gabriel make the poor choice in the red zone that turns into a pick and costs Oregon a chance for 7 or even 3 points? That may be, and with Will Howard, we've seen Will Howard make mistakes, like you said, only 1 or 2 in a game. 1 or 2 mistakes might be what swings this game for one of these teams or another. So this is a week when you would assume focus is probably at a very, very high level here, because we're not the only ones who probably know that, hey, this is probably not going to be a 40-point game. So you're going to get to a point where in the second half, the sliding doors moment of the game, that you fit the ball into the tight window, where he talked about, making a throw to Emeka Egbuka, the second touchdown on Saturday against Iowa. Talked about the fact that it was the wheel route, and he said it was a throw he didn't make in practice. So he was glad to get a chance to make it, and he threw it into a tight window, and, was very happy to make that throw in the game. Throwing the ball into a tight window, sometimes a defensive back gets a hand on the ball or doesn't get a hand on the ball, and that's the difference.
Yeah, against Boise State, the Oregon defense, I believe, had 13 pass breakups, which it's a lot.
That is a lot.
They are among the nation's leaders in pass breakups, including cornerback Jabbar Muhammad. Defensively for Ohio State, I did ask Brian Day how much input do he and Chip Kelly give to Jim Knowles at times about stuff they're seeing, stuff that they could exploit, stuff that hey, we could do this if we wanted, or we would attack you this way. And he's like, 30,000-foot view. Day he'll be in some of the meetings and he'll throw some things out there. Chip is pretty much the head coach of the offense, and Jim Knowles is the head coach of the defense. They try not to necessarily mix the two, but I think this is one where you need. They do have staff meetings where they talk about this, but you have an opportunity with 2 really good offensive minds in Chip Kelly and Ryan Day to look at this Ohio State defense and point out the vulnerabilities. You see it every day in practice. You know what you're going against, and be like, I'm not trying to step on your toes.
Yeah. Well, but I wonder, he didn't say this, but I kind of wonder, like you said, you see it every day in practice. They don't need to say, hey, here's how I would attack this, because guess what?
Right.
Here's how we did attack it. Would you like some film? Good news. We just made some for you. Yeah. This is not Jim Knowles' first rodeo. This is not Chip Kelly's first rodeo. I think that's something where they can teach each other. I mean, Tony, do you know what iron does?
Sharpens iron.
That is the word around this building. That is what I've heard once or twice over the years inside these walls. That's the players generally talk about it in terms of the players, but that can be true of the coaches as well, where you're going up against the defense. It's like, well, okay, guess what? They've seen everything you've run. Go through fall camp, and boy, are they sick of going up against each other, because they've seen everything they run, and they know, okay, the tendency is this, then they do this, and you know that better than, your own team better than any team is ever going to know you. So I think there's probably a little bit of that becomes self-taught.
I'm fascinated to see how aggressive this defense is this week, the Ohio State defense, going against a quarterback who may eventually be the all-time passing yardage leader in NCAA football history because of the extra time that he's gotten to play. He's a guy, Dillon Gabriel, that has seen everything, has made every decision, has made every throw, is not necessarily an interception machine, despite the fact that he's thrown 3 interceptions the past 2 weeks. I don't think you can go into this game expecting to turn him over. You just have to get him off schedule, create some inaccuracies, and create some 3rd and long situations that make it. He does not have the biggest arm.
No,
he's got a quick release, and with that quick release, if you play more aggressively, then you can't really get too far downfield. So I just think early downs are going to be key, and then if you have 3rd and longs, you got to really, really like Ohio State's chance.
Well, I think the first question, or one of the first questions that Ryan Day got asked, was about the luxury of having the cornerbacks that they have. And Oregon's wide receivers are good, but Oregon's wide receivers are not otherworldly. They're good receivers. Tez Johnson in the slot, we've talked about a bunch. The outside receivers are fine, but they didn't have a big game against Michigan State last week. The Ohio State corners should be able to hold up against them. We'll see. And in a game like this, in 3rd and 7, again, a corner who gets his finger on the ball is versus not getting his finger on the ball. It could be the difference between a first down, which sustains a drive, and you're talking about very, very fine margins. But Ohio State is as well equipped to deal with the Oregon passing game as you reasonably could hope to be. I don't know that there's anyone in the country that is better equipped to deal with the Oregon passing game. We'll see how the linebackers hold up. How do the linebackers hold up on 2nd and 6? Can they get them to 3rd and 5, or is it going to be 3rd and 2? Is it going to be 3rd and 8, or is it going to be 3rd and 4? These are the little things that are, small enough, sort of windows or small enough differences that are going to end up making a big difference in the big picture.
Well, and we know Will Howard will continue to run more. Dillon Gabriel will do the same. He had a touchdown or 2 against Michigan State. He rushed for 100 yards against Texas last year or so. Like he can go when he needs to, and I believe he will be a part of the running game in this one, which will help Jordan James then get going. But this is where we talked about. Let's talk about the tackling of the linebackers. It's not just the running backs; they're going to have to tackle Dillon Gabriel as well. Super chat.
Mike Farino, Tyleik Williams will be super important to collapse the interior of the line, push the interior back, and Gabriel will have issues throwing to the middle of the field given his height and also tipped balls.
Well, I think Tyleik Williams is going to be a huge factor. And I think maybe there's been a little of a Tyleik Williams Appreciation Society thing going the last couple weeks where you saw them play without him against Michigan State. And Michigan State didn't run the ball incredibly well, but they hit a big one at the beginning of the game. But you didn't have a ton of interior pass rush, and you had some guys where 2 yards turned into 4 yards and 3 yards turned into 5 yards. That really didn't happen against Iowa. And Tyleik Williams in the middle of that line is a big part of why. And obviously he's back this week. He feels like he might be. I was talking about Ty Hamilton being, the most underappreciated player on the team. I saw the PFF grades, which I know, apply the appropriate asterisk here, but it was the top-rated defensive lineman in the Big Ten, and Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, and Ty Hamilton were 3 of the top 4 or 3 of the top 5 in the entire Big Ten last week, and that's against a decent Iowa offensive line. This is not, they blew up Akron, congratulations.
No, and Tyleik Williams, as Mike Farino mentioned, blowing up the inside, getting right in Dillon Gabriel's face, matching the hand when he tries to throw it, batting it down is going to be huge there. Ty Hamilton as well. Ryan Day was asked about keeping Tyleik Williams in the game when they go to the Rushman package. He said they've talked about that, but this is also a snap count issue. Like that's also they can't play him. They don't want to play him 50 snaps. They can. They've done it before. Yeah. They want to keep it to 35, 40, half of the game basically. And so when you have opportunities to get him out, you want him out there in running downs.
Right.
You want him to contain that. So this is an opportunity to just give him a break, even though he's a fantastic pass rusher. But you can rush the passer on 1st and 2nd down as well. And that's what he'll do. But they have had those conversations. But they do like Larry Johnson definitely likes the rushman. I don't know how effective it's necessarily been. Caden Curry's had his moments inside. I don't know. Certainly not been – can't fault it for not being 2016, 2017 levels of effectiveness. But
Nick Bosa is not the young, inexperienced guy. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Do we have any questions we want to get to?
Yeah. Drowsy Dragon, which quarterback is more likely to turn it over?
Which quarterback is more likely to turn it over? That's from Drowsy Dragon. Tom, which quarterback is more likely to turn this ball over? Because I'll say Will Howard has thrown interceptions in 3 straight games. Dillon Gabriel has thrown 3 interceptions in the past 2 games. I don't know how many fumbles there have been in there. Which defense is more likely to cause turnovers?
Right.
Which quarterback is more likely to force something? We've seen Dillon Gabriel force things.
We have. I think there's a possibility that Jordan Birch gets Will Howard from the blind side, and that's one where it's like, it's a turnover, but it's kind of not really on you. These 2 quarterbacks are so similar to me in a lot of ways, where they don't have the biggest arms, but they talk so similarly about football. And I think Will Howard and Dillon Gabriel have both said some variation of, I've seen it all at this point. I've kind of, they've been around for 5-6 years. You've seen pretty much every variation of defense. You've played in different offenses. You're not going to get caught. You'd have played in big games. You played in loud venues. Not the biggest arms, not always pinpoint CJ Stroud accuracy, but very similar guys. Even played together in the Big 12 for a while. I mean, very, very similar guys. The answer is shrug emoji. But the answer to that question, whatever that ends up being, is going to be one of the deciding factors on Saturday.
Yeah, and neither quarterback, I think, will get too high, too low in terms of they've seen everything. Will Howard talked about it. I was down 27-7 against Texas. Got to stay neutral and come back. So it's with the quarterback, I guess, maybe does not allow his mistake to turn into another mistake. And I do think Dillon Gabriel is going to have to balance not being – he was maybe too risky and maybe too aggressive last week. And does he dial it back too much?
Yeah, well, yeah. Do you overcorrect there? That's the thing. I do like the idea.
Into it.
I do like the idea of saying neutral while you're down to Texas. Is that horn sideways? You like that?
Like that?
I don't know.
Kevin?
Yes, I asked about 95. How do we feel about the O-line?
How do we feel about the Ohio State O-line? Tom, I don't think you can feel any better about it right now, given the last couple of years of it.
Yeah, I think this is a substantially better offensive line than they had last year. This is a substantially better offensive line than they had in week 1. They're going to get the best test they've gotten so far. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. My question is on pass pro, and pass pro might be helped by the fact they can run the ball.
Yeah, well, and they've been very good with their pass pro, and Josh Simmons has been outstanding at left tackle. I think Tigger Sabola played most of the game last week against Iowa. I would expect that to continue, which then maybe solidifies things even more. One of the things that I don't know anybody's really talking about right now is Seth McLaughlin being that experienced center in a place where they're going to have to go with silent counts. And he's done that, and Will Howard's done that. You've got that ability to do it, and however they choose to do it, and in that kind of a crowd. So I think the experience, the battery, basically, the experience up the middle, offensively and defensively, is going to be huge in this one. But just dealing with the crowd, that offensive line, and the quarterback being on the same page and having to be on that same page silently, it was a nice little test at Michigan State, but it's not going to be anything like the actual test.
You're right. That was like a preseason game in a lot of ways where, you've gone on the road. Great. And you've been in front of a crowd. Great.
Good for you.
I think Michigan State Stadium is actually bigger than Autzen. Autzen is substantially louder than Michigan State Stadium. And, the fact that the Ohio State team was able to take the Michigan State crowd out of that game relatively early meant you didn't have 4 quarters of that. You might have 4 quarters of that on Saturday night. You very well might have 4 quarters of that on Saturday night. So it's definitely going to be something that's different. But with, like you said, they talked about during interviews today the fact that they've all done silent count before. This is a veteran team. Outside of Jeremiah Smith, who I'm sure will figure it out based on literally everything else, this is a veteran team pretty much everywhere on that field. So this is not going to be – it's the first time going to Oregon. It might be the first 2 versus 3 game for some of these guys. This is not the first time that they've had to go on the road in a tough environment.
No, and I'm fascinated to see how it goes. Coaches, players, everybody. It's the biggest game of the season until the next one. Kevin?
Yeah, Peace Clan. Which of these 4 scenarios is more likely to happen? Number 1, Ohio State blows out Oregon. Number 2, Ohio State ekes out a win. Number 3, Oregon blows out Ohio State. Number 4, Oregon ekes out a win.
So
most likely are 1 and 2.
So what's the most likely scenario on this one? Scenario 1, Ohio State blows Oregon out. Scenario 2, Ohio State ekes out a win. Scenario 3, Oregon blows out Ohio State. Scenario 4, Oregon ekes out a win over Ohio State. Tom, famously, you were terrible at this game based on the 2014.
2014, yes.
Big Ten championship.
Yeah, it was. I had a tweet that before I deleted my account about 10 years ago during one of these stupid election cycles. I can't remember which one, but I had a tweet where I talked about going into that game. The only thing that would surprise me would be blow out Ohio State win. Everything else totally plausible. And then Ohio State won 59-0, which, eking, blowout, it's somewhere on that scale.
Which of these is the most likely? I really, I don't feel good about this question. Ohio State is only favored by like 3 or 4 points right now. So that would tell me that most likely it's an eke out, but I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'd be shocked if Ohio State blows Oregon out. But also, this is going to be a real legit test for Ohio State on in every
Mhm.
facet.
Yeah.
And things can go bad very quickly
Mhm.
on the road in a
Mhm.
place like that. This is the first time they've faced anything like it. So I don't think one of these is certainly more likely, but I don't think is one much more likely than all of the others. Like, is there one that is much more likely? Like, give me your answers.
I still don't have a real strong feel for this, because you can certainly see a way that any of those four happen. There is a scenario where any of those four happen. I think Ohio State is by and large probably a more talented team on the whole. I like the Ohio State coaching staff ahead of probably a little bit better than the Oregon coaching staff. You have the cross-country travel for whatever that's worth. You have the loud environment. You have the unfamiliar surroundings. All of that stuff can play into it. So I think, to me, most likely is Ohio State wins by 3-5 points, something like that, followed by Oregon wins by 3 points, followed by Ohio State wins by 2 touchdowns or more, followed by Oregon wins by 2 touchdowns or more. But you can absolutely, this is not, we've had shows before where we've talked about, hey, Michigan State's path to any kind of win is, and then a miracle happened. Right. This is one where you can plausibly see a very realistic path to either the quarterback throws an early pick six, you get behind, the opposing offense scores another touchdown, you're down 14. Oregon's made some huge plays on special teams. Ohio State has guys who can make big plays. You can see Oregon returns a kickoff for a touchdown. You can see Ohio State has Quinshon Judkins run for 80 yards. You could see, and if someone's up 17-0, both of these coaches know you have to keep the pedal down. No, this is not going to be get up 17 and then shift it into neutral and roll it down the driveway. This is going to be pedal down. And if you get down 17, then you have to press. Then you have to start throwing into those tight windows. Then you have to hold them. You cannot fold them at that point when you're down by 17. So then
bluff.
Then it's like, well, I'm all in with a 3-2 off suited. Is that good? I don't know. I don't know the odds off the top of my head, but that's where you've got to press, and that's where the other team knows you have to press, and then you get into a situation where then you make another mistake, and then it really spirals.
I do think it's interesting. This was a game in the offseason I chalked up as a loss for Ohio State because it was going to be their most difficult road game. Mm-hmm. The rule is you generally don't want to.
You never pick anyone to go undefeated,
so
Tony.
This is always the most likely, as we've gotten, probably with Oregon's first game against Idaho. Then the second game against Boise State. It's like, well, I don't think you can just chalk this up as a loss for Ohio State. The more you watch both teams, even though it's there, I'm not at a spot right now where this still feels like a loss for Ohio State. It can definitely happen for sure, but I feel a lot better about Ohio State's chances than I did in June. But then it was just like a default answer by me because we hadn't seen
anything. We hadn't seen anything, and you had so many changes, and what's Will Howard going to look like? How's the offensive line going to come together? I think a lot of that stuff the offensive line is not perfect. Will Howard is not perfect, but they've come together. You're above a 50 percentile outcome for probably both of those, and in terms of the defense, and the linebackers are still a little bit of a question. How's that going to go? Is the pass rush going to be able to get home? You got a bunch of that stuff. How's the pass pro going to hold up against the defensive ends for Oregon? All of these are still legitimate questions, but I think on the whole, looking at it, you have to feel more optimistic about Ohio State's chances in this game now than you did back in the summer.
I'm gonna give you some over-unders on Will Howard's performance. If we go back to C.J. Stroud's game against Oregon, so I don't know, was it like 394 yards passing? Did he throw 2 or 3 touchdowns in that one? He had 2 interceptions.
And some failed fourth down conversions too. I remember.
So I just like if he does that, if he has C.J. Stroud's game, is it the 2 interceptions are too much to overcome? They were for the 2021 team.
I feel like I kind of need. I would rather if you tell me how the running game goes, I feel like that's going to be a better. That's going to give me. Let's do this the Ohio State Michigan way. You tell me who runs for more yards per carry, and I will tell you who wins the football game. If we're getting one stat, that's the stat I would like.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel that that's going to hold true?
6.
Really? Okay. I would have expected more.
I mean, sure. This is a close game, and if Ohio State can really consistently run the ball, I think that's just going to really open stuff up. The pathway to Ohio State winning in a blowout, if we're going to go through these 4 scenarios, the pathway to Ohio State winning in a blowout is Ohio State can run the ball really well, and you're running for 6 yards a carry, which then opens up everything in the path, because then you got to bring your safeties down, and then Jeremiah Smith is open, whether Jeremiah Smith is open or not, and then that's when it really snowballs. If Oregon can do that, we saw what Oregon did on offense against Michigan State last week. It was just that they had what the back have 150 yards at halftime. If they can do that, that is probably a pretty good indication for Oregon's chances.
Right. That's enough of that question. It wasn't even a super chat. We shouldn't have spent so much time on it.
I blame
Kevin?
you.
Yeah, Lisa Sims. I was just going to ask, what will be the deciding factor on how you see the game going?
What will be the deciding factor in how we see the game going? I mean, for me, it's just having seen Ohio State's offensive line and the running game perform to this point. Because when I envision this game, I just see Quinshon Judkins having success.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, there's Travion Henderson as well.
Right.
And then Will Howard, he just kept it in 7 yards for a first down.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just threw it to Jeremiah Smith. And everything that this Ohio State defense has is what you would need to contend with whatever kind of offense you're facing.
Mm-hmm. So
they've got everything they need, and everything that they have is played pretty well. Question marks about linebackers and such, and it's a good thing they've got safeties behind them that they do. But everything that you would need to win this game, Ohio State has. Yeah, I would agree with that. This feels like a game where you don't want your quarterback to have to go win the game. You want to be able to win it with running the ball, make the easy throws. Don't be put in a situation where you have to make the tough throw. Keep things simple. Keep things just on schedule. Again, very boring, but that's the quarterback that has to go out and make the Superman play to win the game. That team is probably not in great shape if that's the case. Kev?
Yes, David Greenshield, thoughts on the OSU pass rush versus the Oregon offensive line?
Yeah, the Ohio State pass rush versus the Oregon offensive line. In the preseason, 2 good tackles for Oregon. They've kind of been up and down a little bit. I think we would agree on that.
Yeah.
But I know people want to see more from the Ohio State pass rush. The PFFs of the world will tell you that it's been pretty good without blitzing. Dillon Gabriel is going to get rid of the ball quickly, so I'm not expecting a bunch of sacks. Now, Michigan State got him right out of the gate with a very delayed blitz, and I think that was again where I don't know how seriously he took Michigan State.
Yeah,
to be so patient and so lackadaisical with some of his throws. I don't expect any of that patience and lackadaisicality.
Well, you're going to have a little more adrenaline running for Ohio State than you did for Michigan State, and that's true for the Ohio State team as well. They're going to have more adrenaline for this game than they did playing up in East Lansing. So, yeah, I think the Ohio State pass rush can impact the game whether they get sacks or not. Yeah, if you can get a sack, yeah, great, absolutely. Like hit them, turn the ball over, fantastic, whatever, sure. They'll. If that is offered up, I'm sure Larry Johnson would take that with a smile on his face. But if you can get the ball out, you limit what they can do in the passing game. You look at the Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith hit Iowa for that long pass on like a stutter and go. You've got to protect for 3.5 seconds to make that happen. If you can't protect for 3.5 seconds, well, then that takes that whole thing out, and then you can bring your safeties down and all that stuff. It all kind of plays together. But I could see the Ohio State defensive line making an impact. I don't think this is going to be someone has 4 sacks. I'm not expecting a Chase Young game by any means, but I think they can certainly make an impact.
Yep.
It's 2 p.m. So
okay.
We should wrap it up. They'd like us to be out of here right about now. So want to thank you all for joining us. Hit the thumbs up before you go if you could, if you're watching us live on YouTube or plausibly live whenever you're watching on YouTube. Of course, continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That was a fantastic time to become a member. The season is almost halfway over, Tom, and this thing flies by so fast, the regular season, but there's plenty more postseason to come as well. So find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com and, of course, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.